He called her dress a disgrace, a pathetic attempt to belong in a world she had been brutally cast out of. Standing in the heart of the Starlight Children's Foundation Gala, Jonathan Crestwood, her ex-husband looked at her with pure disdain, his new, glittering fiancée on his arm. He thought he was delivering the final crushing blow to the woman whose confidence he had spent years dismantling. He thought he had shattered her. He had no idea he was speaking to the most powerful person in the room. What happens next isn't just karma. It's a corporate and social takedown, so spectacular, no one saw it coming. The air in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Sackler wing was thick with the scent of money, a heady perfume of opportunity and narcissism. Light from the massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park refracted through a galaxy of diamond necklaces and champagne flutes, casting shimmering patterns across the ancient Egyptian temple of Dendo, which served as the gala's majestic, silent centerpiece. This was the Starlight Children's Foundation Gala, the undisputed apex of New York's philanthropic calendar, where fortunes were pledged on a handshake and reputations were made or broken over a canapé. And into this glittering shark tank walked Catherine Dubois. She felt like a ghost, not an ethereal haunting spirit, but the more mundane kind, a person so out of place they might as well be invisible. She wore a dress the color of a midnight storm cloud, a simple, unadorned sheath of slate-grey silk that fell to her ankles. It had long sleeves, a modest neckline, and no sequins, no feathers, no ostentatious cutouts. In a sea of couture gowns that screamed for attention, Catherine's dress was a whisper she knew that most people here would interpret as a cry for help. Her hand, free of any rings, smoothed down the fabric. It was a nervous gesture, a phantom limb reaching for the wedding band she hadn't worn in 3 years. 3 years since the divorce. 3 years since Jonathan Crestwood had systematically and surgically excised her from the life they had built, convincing her and everyone they knew that she was nothing without him. He was here tonight, of course. She'd seen his name on the preliminary guest list. Jonathan Crestwood, CEO of Crestwood Capital, and Ms. Bianca della Rocha. Even their names on paper looked glossy and expensive. She hadn't seen him in person since the final court date, when he'd looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt, the victor surveying the spoils of a war she hadn't even known they were fighting. Catherine took a flute of champagne from a passing waiter, the bubbles a welcome distraction. Her gaze drifted across the room, a Rolodex of Wall Street titans, tech moguls, and old money scions. She saw Robert Chen, the shipping magnate, locked in conversation with a senator. She saw the socialite triplets, the Patterson sisters, posing for a photographer from Vogue. It was a world she had once navigated as Jonathan's plus one, her role limited to smiling demurely, laughing at the right jokes, and never ever outshining her husband. That was the deal. He was the sun. She was the planet existing only to reflect his light. He'd been a rising star at a prestigious investment firm when they met. She'd been a promising software engineer with a revolutionary idea for sustainable energy management systems. She'd put her project on the back burner to support his career, manage their home, and host the dinner parties that greased the wheels of his ascent. He had absorbed her ideas during late-night talks, repackaging her concepts about market inefficiencies and sustainable futures as his own brilliant insights in the boardroom. When he finally launched his own firm, Crestwood Capital, it was built on a foundation she had unknowingly laid. And when he no longer needed that foundation, he'd discarded her. The divorce had been swift and brutal. His lawyers painted her as an unambitious housewife with no claim to the fortune he'd built. She, exhausted and emotionally hollowed out, had taken the paltry settlement just to be free. "Catherine, my God, is that really you?" The voice, dripping with saccharine surprise, cut through her thoughts. She turned. It was Amelia Sterling, a woman whose entire personality was curated by her husband's stock portfolio. She was flanked by 2 other women from Catherine's old life, their eyes doing a rapid forensic scan of her appearance. "Amelia, hello." Catherine said, her voice even. I almost didn't recognize you, Amelia chirped, her eyes lingering on Catherine's dress. The unspoken addendum hung in the air. You look so plain. It's been ages. What have you been up to? We never see you anywhere. Anywhere meant the Hamptons, Aspen, St. Bart's, and charity luncheons, where the main course was gossip. I've been busy, Catherine replied, offering no details. The women exchanged glances. Well, one of them, Marissa said, it's brave of you to come tonight. All things considered. Brave, the word they use for charity cases and lost causes. Catherine gave a small, tight smile. She knew what they were thinking. They thought she was here as a guest of a guest, a forgotten relic hoping to glimpse the life she'd lost. The thought was so far from the truth, it was almost funny. Her gaze was pulled as if by a magnetic force across the room. There he was, Jonathan. He stood near the reflecting pool in front of the temple, looking every bit the master of the universe. His tuxedo was tailored to perfection. His hair was artfully styled, and his laugh was a loud, confident bark that demanded attention. On his arm was Bianca della Rocha. She was stunning in a gown of molten gold, a dress that looked as if it had been poured onto her statuesque frame. She glittered. She shone. She was everything Catherine was not, and everything Jonathan had always wanted. As if sensing her stare, Jonathan's head turned. His eyes swept the crowd, first with indifference, then with a flicker of recognition, and finally with a slow, cruel smirk. He leaned down and whispered something in Bianca's ear. Bianca's perfectly sculpted lips curled into a similar smile of derision. And then they started walking towards her. Catherine's heart didn't pound. Her palms didn't sweat. The woman who would have crumbled 3 years ago was gone. In her place was someone who had spent those years forging herself in the fires of anonymity and ambition. She had taken her paltry settlement, combined it with a small inheritance from her grandmother, and poured every ounce of her being into the project she had abandoned for him. She had founded a company that was about to change the world. She stood her ground, took a deliberate sip of her champagne, and waited. The ghost at the feast was about to be seen. The 10 yards of polished stone floor that separated them felt like a battlefield. As Jonathan and Bianca closed the distance, a small, invisible bubble of silence formed around Catherine. The ambient chatter of the gala seemed to fade, replaced by the thudding of a single defiant drumbeat in her chest. This was the moment she had both dreaded and on some level prepared for since seeing his name on the list. Jonathan stopped a few feet from her, his posture a study in condescending ease. He looked her up and down, his gaze lingering on her simple grey dress with the theatricality of a stage villain. It wasn't a quick glance. It was a slow, deliberate appraisal designed to inventory her every perceived flaw. Well, well, he began, his voice a smooth baritone sneer that she remembered from the worst of their arguments. Catherine, I have to admit I'm surprised to see you here. Bianca, clinging to his arm, let out a delicate tinkling laugh that was perfectly calibrated to mock. Darling, she purred, her eyes not even meeting Catherine's, instead addressing a point somewhere over her shoulder. I think surprised is an understatement. I thought this was a closed event. The implication was clear. You don't belong here. Someone must have made a mistake. Catherine kept her expression neutral, her eyes fixed on Jonathan. It's a fundraiser, Jonathan. It's open to anyone who buys a ticket. She chose her words carefully, a simple statement of fact that refused to engage with their premise. Jonathan's smirk widened. He enjoyed this, she realized. It wasn't enough that he had won. He needed to see her lose again and again. A ticket? Of course. And I'm sure that set you back a pretty penny. Let me guess you sold one of your mother's old brooches. The jab was personal, a cruel reference to the jewellery Catherine's mother had left her pieces she'd been forced to sell early on to make rent after the divorce. He knew exactly which wounds to poke. It's admirable, I suppose. he continued, gesturing vaguely at her, trying to keep up appearances. But honestly, Catherine, you should have saved your money. His eyes went back to her dress, and this time he didn't hold back. That dress, it's a choice. Is that from a vintage shop, or did you make it yourself? I remember your little sewing hobby. Bianca chimed in again, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. It's very minimalist, very sustainable, I'm sure. She looked down at her own glittering gold lame gown. Mine is a custom de la renta. I feel almost guilty wearing it. It could probably fund a small village for a year. She didn't look guilty at all. She looked smug. Every word was a carefully sharpened dart. Vintage, hobby, sustainable. Words they used to mean cheap, amateurish, and poor. They were painting her as a pathetic creature, a little grey mouse scurrying in the corners of their opulent world. Catherine didn't flinch. She thought of the fabric her dress was made from. It was a prototype, a revolutionary biosynthetic silk developed in the labs of her company, Origen Dynamics. It was stronger than steel, softer than cashmere, and 100% biodegradable. A single yard of it was currently worth more than Bianca's entire couture gown. The irony was a suit of armor. It's comfortable, Catherine said simply. Jonathan laughed a harsh barking sound. Comfortable. That's what people say when they can't afford style. Look around you, Catherine. This is the big leagues. People make an effort. Showing up like this. It's not just embarrassing for you, it's disrespectful to the foundation, to the hosts. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, though it was loud enough for those nearby to hear. You look like your staff, a very depressed, very poorly paid member of the waitstaff. A few people in their immediate vicinity had turned to watch the exchange, their faces a mixture of curiosity and pity for the drab woman being verbally dismantled by the formidable Jonathan Crestwood and his dazzling partner. This was the kill shot, the final humiliation. He wanted to see her cry. He wanted to see her run from the room in shame. He was trying to erase her, to confirm to himself and the world that she was, and always would be, nothing. But Catherine didn't look away. She didn't shrink. Instead, a strange sense of calm washed over her. It was the calm of absolute certainty. She saw him not as the monster who had haunted her past, but as a man, a predictable, petty, and ultimately insignificant man. He was playing a game whose rules no longer applied to her. He was fighting a war that she had already won on a battlefield he couldn't even see. She gave him a small, enigmatic smile. It was the first genuine smile she'd shown all night. It didn't reach her eyes, but it wasn't meant for him. It was for herself. Thank you for your concern, Jonathan, she said, her voice quiet but firm, cutting through his arrogance with its unexpected serenity. But I'm perfectly comfortable, and I have a feeling I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Without another word, she turned her back on them. She didn't storm off. She didn't retreat. She simply pivoted with graceful finality and walked toward the reflecting pool, leaving Jonathan and Bianca standing there, momentarily stunned by her refusal to be broken. For a split second, a flicker of confusion crossed Jonathan's face. The scene hadn't played out the way he'd written it. He quickly masked it with a dismissive scoff, turning back to Bianca. Pathetic, he muttered loud enough for Catherine to hear. Truly pathetic. But as Catherine walked away, the pitying stares of the onlookers didn't sting. The whispers didn't cut. All she felt was the smooth, strong fabric of her dress against her skin, a secret she was holding close, and the thrilling, terrifying knowledge that in less than an hour, everyone in this room would know her name. Catherine walked until she reached the far side of the reflecting pool, putting the cold, ancient stone of the temple between her and her past. She stood before the massive sandstone monument, its hieroglyphs telling stories of gods and pharaohs, of endurance and time. In that moment, she felt a kinship with it. It had been moved piece by piece from a world away and reassembled in a foreign land, yet it retained its silent, unshakable dignity. She took a deep, steadying breath, the cool, conditioned air a balm on her frayed nerves. The confrontation had been worse than she'd imagined. The sheer, unadulterated venom in Jonathan's voice, the casual cruelty. It had been a stark reminder of the man she had escaped. A part of her, a small wounded part, felt the sting. The old insecurities whispered at the edges of her mind. You don't belong. They're right. Look at you. She closed her eyes, shutting them out. No, that was the old Catherine. The new Catherine, the one who had worked 18-hour days for 3 years, who had pitched to skeptical venture capitalists, who had built a team of brilliant minds from the ground up, who had created a company, now valued at $9 billion, that Catherine belonged wherever she damn well pleased. A remarkable structure, isn't it? The voice was calm and distinguished, with a hint of an old-world accent. Catherine opened her eyes and turned. Standing beside her was an elderly gentleman, perhaps in his late 70s, holding a glass of what looked like whiskey. He was impeccably dressed in a classic tuxedo, his silver hair neatly combed, and his eyes behind a pair of gold-rimmed glasses were kind and perceptive. She recognized him from the Foundation's board profiles, Arthur Pembroke, a retired diplomat and one of the Starlight Foundation's most respected, long-serving patrons. It is, Catherine agreed, her voice still a little tight. It makes you feel small, or it makes you feel connected to something vast and enduring, Mr. Pembroke countered gently. He took a sip of his drink, his gaze thoughtful. It's all a matter of perspective, my dear. He turned his kind eyes to her. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation just now with Mr. Crestwood. Catherine's posture stiffened slightly. I apologize if it was a disturbance. Not at all, he said, waving a dismissive hand. On the contrary, I was struck by your composure. Most people would not have handled such a boorish display with such grace. He looked pointedly across the pool at Jonathan, who was now holding court with a group of fawning investors, Bianca laughing shrilly at his side. Some people mistake wealth for class, a common and rather vulgar error. Catherine was taken aback by his candour. Thank you, Mr. Pembroke. Arthur, please, he insisted. I make it a point to know the people who matter in a room, and you, my dear, intrigue me. Your name is Catherine Dubois, is it not? She nodded, surprised he knew her name. She wasn't on the board, nor was she a known public figure. At least, not yet. I saw you arrive, Sir, he explained. There's a certain quiet confidence about you that stands out in a room full of peacocks. It's the look of someone who has nothing to prove. It's a look I've come to associate with true power. His words were like a restorative tonic. He saw her. He didn't see a pathetic ex-wife in a plain dress. He saw strength. I'm not sure about power, Catherine demurred, a hint of a genuine smile gracing her lips. I think it's just exhaustion. Arthur Pembroke chuckled a warm, rich sound. The most powerful people often are. It's the ones who are constantly striving, shouting their own importance from the rooftops, that you need to watch out for. They are often the most hollow. His eyes twinkled. Like Mr. Crestwood. Crestwood. Capital, isn't it? I've been reading about them. Heavily leveraged in fossil fuels. A precarious position to be in these days. One might even say it's a dinosaur strategy. Catherine's interest was piqued. You follow the energy markets, Arthur. I follow anything that involves the future, he said. And the future, Ms. Dubois, is in sustainability. It's in innovation. It's in the hands of people who can see beyond the next fiscal quarter. He looked directly at her, a knowing glint in his eye. I've also been reading about an extraordinary new company, a private firm that's been making massive strides in energy storage and synthetic materials. They've been very quiet, very strategic. Origin Dynamics, I believe it's called. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. He knew. Somehow he knew. She didn't have to confirm it. The look on her face was enough. Arthur's smile was wide and genuine. I had a suspicion when I saw your name on the benefactor's pre-brief. It's a pleasure to finally meet the architect of what I believe will be one of the most important companies of the next century. The validation in his voice, the quiet respect from a man of his stature, was more potent than any public applause. It was a lifeline thrown to her in a moment of doubt. "The world doesn't know about you yet, Catherine," he said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "But tonight it will. I must say, I'm very much looking forward to the look on Mr. Crestwood's face. It promises to be a far more entertaining spectacle than the silent auction." For the first time all evening, Catherine laughed. It was a real, unburdened laugh that seemed to echo slightly in the grand hall. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for this stranger, this unexpected ally who had truly seen her before anyone else. "To the future, then," Arthur said, raising his glass in a small toast. Catherine raised her own flute. "To the future." She echoed, her voice clear and strong. The whispers from her past were finally silent, vanquished by the promise of what was to come. The gala moved into its formal phase. The ambient chatter softened as guests found their designated tables, which were arranged in a grand semicircle facing a stage set up before the temple. Catherine found her seat at table 1, the place of honor, alongside Arthur Pembroke and the foundation's chairwoman, a stern but fair woman named Judith Bell. Catherine's name card simply read K. Dubois, a deliberate act of understatement she had requested. From her vantage point, she had a clear view of the entire room. She saw Jonathan and Bianca at table 3, close enough to be seen, but not at the head table. She watched as Jonathan schmoozed table hopping with practiced ease. He was in his element, a predator, gliding through his natural habitat. He stopped at a table with several partners from the powerful law firm Sullivan and Cromwell, sharing a laugh and a firm handshake. He was selling the illusion of success, and everyone was buying it. Catherine focused on her dinner, a meticulously plated salmon dish, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about Crestwood Capital. Arthur's comment had confirmed her own research. Jonathan's firm had doubled down on oil and natural gas futures, a high-risk, high-reward bet that had soured dramatically in the last 6 months with the passage of new international climate accords. The firm was bleeding money. Their investors were getting nervous. Their only path to salvation was a massive pivot toward the green energy sector. They needed to acquire or partner with a company that had the technology they lacked, and they needed to do it fast. She remembered a confidential memo her chief operations officer had shown her just last week. It was an inquiry sent through a third-party acquisition scout, gauging their interest in a potential partnership. The inquiring party was anonymous, but the profile described was a mid-size investment capital firm, heavily vested in traditional energy, looking for a lifeline. The memo had described the firm as desperate. It was Crestwood Capital. She was sure of it. Jonathan was hunting for a deal with Origin Dynamics, and he had no earthly idea that the CEO he was trying to court was the woman he had just publicly humiliated. The dramatic irony was so thick she could almost taste it. The evening's host, a charismatic television personality named James O'Connell, took the stage. He was charming and witty, guiding the wealthy patrons through a live auction for extravagant prizes, a week on a private island, a custom sports car, a walk-on role in a Hollywood blockbuster. Catherine watched as Jonathan bid aggressively on a Patek Philippe watch, getting into a bidding war with a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley. He was determined to win, to put on a public display of his financial might. He finally secured it for $250,000, raising his paddle with a triumphant flourish as Bianca kissed his cheek. The room applauded. Arthur Pembroke leaned over to Catherine, his voice a low murmur. "All hat and no cattle, as the Texans say. $250,000 for a watch when his company is leveraged to the hilt. It's not confidence, my dear. It's sheer terror." Catherine just nodded, a cool understanding settling in her heart. Jonathan wasn't just arrogant. He was desperate. That desperation had fueled his cruelty towards her. He needed to feel powerful, and the easiest way to do that was to make someone else feel powerless. He had tried to use her as a stepping stone for his fragile ego. The auction concluded, having raised an impressive $7 million for the foundation. James O'Connell returned to the podium, his expression growing more serious. "What an incredible night," he began, his voice resonating through the hall. "That $7 million will provide critical medical care for thousands of children. But tonight, we are on the cusp of something truly historic for the Starlight Foundation." A hush fell over the room. Forks were placed down. Conversations ceased. This was the moment everyone was waiting for. "For the past 6 months," O'Connell continued, "our foundation has been in talks with a benefactor, a single private entity that wishes to make a transformative impact. This benefactor saw the scope of our mission and didn't just want to help, they wanted to revolutionize what we are capable of." Across the room, Catherine could see Jonathan leaning back in his chair, a smug look on his face. He was probably assuming it was one of his colleagues, an old money family like the Rockefellers or a tech giant like Google. He looked relaxed, proprietary, even as if the announcement was part of the grand spectacle he had paid to witness. "Tonight," O'Connell's voice swelled with emotion, "I am honored to announce the largest single donation in the history of the Starlight Children's Foundation. A donation that will not only fully fund our new research hospital, but will also create a permanent endowment to ensure our work continues for generations to come." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the weight of his words sink in. The silence in the room was absolute, a collective holding of breath. Catherine felt her own heart begin to beat faster. The ticking clock had run out. This was it. "This transformative gift," O'Connell declared, his voice booming, "is a one-time grant of $500 million. A tidal wave of gasps and shocked murmurs swept through the audience. $500 million. It was an unfathomable sum, even for this crowd. People were looking around trying to guess the source. Jonathan's smug expression had been replaced by one of genuine astonishment. His head was swiveling, trying to locate the titan in their midst. "This incredible act of philanthropy," O'Connell beamed, "comes from a company that believes, as we do, that the future is our greatest investment. A true visionary in the world of technology and sustainable energy." Catherine saw Jonathan lean forward, his eyes narrowed in concentration. Energy technology. His mind was surely racing through the list of known players: Tesla, First Solar, Ørsted. Catherine took one last deep breath and met Arthur's supportive gaze. He gave her a subtle, encouraging nod. "Ladies and gentlemen," O'Connell announced, his voice ringing with triumph, "please join me in thanking the benefactor of this historic gift, the leader in next-generation green technology, Origin Dynamics." The name hung in the air for a moment, an unknown quantity to most people in the room. A polite, slightly confused applause began to ripple through the crowd. Jonathan's face was a mask of utter confusion. Origin Dynamics. He'd heard the name. It was the unicorn, the private, untouchable firm his scouts were desperately trying to get a meeting with. But O'Connell wasn't finished. And Origin Dynamics is not just a faceless corporation. It is driven by the vision of one person, the brilliant mind who founded the company, who serves as its CEO, and who is here with us tonight. A woman who has personally pledged this gift on her company's behalf. He scanned the room, a wide smile on his face. "Ladies and gentlemen, the founder and CEO of Origin Dynamics. Please give a huge round of applause to Ms. Catherine Dubois." For a full 3 seconds, the name hung in the air, suspended in a state of collective disbelief. Catherine Dubois. The name was familiar to some as Jonathan Crestwood's forgotten ex-wife. To others, it meant nothing at all. But connected to Origin Dynamics and a $500 million donation, it was a logical impossibility. Then a spotlight operator, guided by a frantic stage manager, found her at table. A brilliant white beam cut through the dim, elegant lighting of the hall, illuminating Catherine in its stark, unforgiving glare. There was no hiding. She was no longer a ghost in a grey dress. She was the epicenter of a shockwave that was tearing through the most powerful room in New York City. The polite, confused applause faltered and died. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with shock and utter incomprehension. Every single head in the room swiveled first to the woman bathed in light, and then, as if pulled by a collective gossipy instinct, to table 3. Jonathan Crestwood was frozen. The blood had drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty, sickly mask of disbelief. His mouth was slightly agape, his eyes wide and unblinking. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost, not the invisible one she had felt like earlier, but a vengeful billion-dollar specter from his past. His mind was clearly struggling to connect two irreconcilable facts: the pathetic, dowdy woman he had eviscerated an hour ago, and the philanthropic titan being celebrated on stage. The system crashed. The logic board fried. Nothing computed. Bianca Della Rocca was faring no better. Her perfectly made-up face was a canvas of horror. Her jaw, which had been set in a permanent line of smug superiority, had gone slack. The custom Della Renta gown suddenly seemed garish, a desperate costume on a woman who had just been rendered utterly irrelevant. Her eyes darted from Catherine to Jonathan, and back again, searching for an explanation that didn't exist. Catherine rose from her seat. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and imbued with a grace no one in the room had ever credited her with possessing. The simple, slate-grey dress, which had been an object of ridicule, now seemed something else entirely. It wasn't plain. It was elegant in its understatement. It wasn't cheap. It was a statement of quiet, unassailable confidence. In the stark white of the spotlight, the fabric seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly luminescence, a subtle hint of the advanced technology woven into its very fibers. Arthur Pembroke and Judith Bell, the foundation's chairwoman, also stood, leading a new wave of applause. This time, it wasn't polite. It was thunderous. It was the sound of 3 of the world's most cynical people acknowledging they had just witnessed something truly extraordinary. It was the sound of a paradigm shift. As Catherine made her way toward the stage, the short walk felt like a marathon. She passed tables of people she had once known. People who had pitied her, ignored her, written her off. She saw Amelia Sterling, her face a comical picture of shock, her wineglass paused halfway to her lips. She saw the Sullivan and Cromwell partners, their expressions shifting from amusement at Jonathan's expense to sharp calculating interest. They were lawyers. They could smell power, and the scent coming off Catherine Dubois was intoxicating. She did not look at Jonathan as she passed his table, but she could feel his gaze on her, a physical weight of burning humiliation. She could feel his world tilting on its axis, the foundations of his arrogance and self-worth crumbling into dust. She ascended the small set of stairs to the stage and shook James O'Connell's outstretched hand. He looked at her with newfound awe and respect. "Ms. Dubois," he said, his voice low and earnest into the microphone. "On behalf of the Starlight Foundation, I am speechless. Thank you." Catherine walked to the podium. She looked out at the sea of faces, a blur of jewels and tuxedos, and stunned expressions. Her eyes scanned the room until they found him, just for a second. She met Jonathan's gaze across the crowded hall. In his eyes she saw it all, the shock, the rage, the dawning horrific understanding of his own colossal misjudgment. He had not only mocked the woman he divorced, he had insulted the CEO of the company he was desperately trying to partner with to save his own. He had ridiculed the dress of the billionaire who had just become the most celebrated philanthropist in the city. She broke eye contact, turning her attention back to the room at large. She was done with him. He was a footnote in her story now. She took a breath, her hands resting lightly on the sides of the lectern. The room was utterly silent, waiting for her to speak. The ghost was about to find her voice. "Good evening," Catherine began, her voice calm and clear, amplified by the microphone to fill every corner of the vast hall. There was no tremor of nervousness, no hint of triumph. There was only a quiet, resolute authority. 3 years ago, she said, letting the words hang in the air, I found myself with an unexpected gift, the gift of a blank slate, a chance to start over. It was terrifying, but it was also freeing. It gave me the space to return to an idea I had set aside long ago, an idea born from a simple belief that the most powerful innovations are those that create a sustainable and equitable future for everyone. She didn't need to say what prompted this gift. Everyone in the room who knew her story could fill in the blanks. Jonathan squirmed in his seat, the indirect reference, a spotlight far hotter than the one on stage. That belief is what led to the creation of Origin Dynamics. She continued, her tone becoming more passionate, more animated. My team and I, a group of the most brilliant and dedicated minds I have ever met, have spent every waking hour since then developing technologies we believe will fundamentally change our relationship with energy. We're not just building better solar panels or more efficient batteries. We are creating a new ecosystem, a future where energy is not only clean and abundant, but accessible to all. She paused, looking out at the rapt audience. We have been fortunate to be successful, very successful. This was a colossal understatement, and the quiet way she delivered it held more power than any boast. But what is the point of building a better future if we do not protect the children who are destined to inherit it? The Starlight Children's Foundation doesn't just heal sick children, it gives them a chance at that future. It provides hope where there is despair, and it is a beacon of what is possible when compassion is paired with action. She then gestured to her own dress, the simple slate grey sheath. The ridicule I received earlier for this dress was in a way understandable in this setting. She said, a murmur going through the crowd as they rolled the ugly scene. Bianca della Rocha looked as if she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Jonathan's face was now a deep, florid red. But this dress, Catherine went on, is more than just fabric. It is a symbol of our philosophy at Origin. It's made from a prototype biosilk we developed in our labs. It is created from organic carbon-capturing materials, requires 90% less water than traditional silk production, and is ounce for ounce stronger than Kevlar. It looks simple, but it is the product of immense complexity, innovation, and a commitment to substance over style. It represents our core belief: the most profound strength is often the one you cannot see. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. The dress wasn't a mark of poverty, it was a trophy of innovation. It was a wearable testament to her company's and her own success. The ultimate, if you know status symbol in a room obsessed with them, and none of them had known. Origin Dynamics is donating $500 million to the Starlight Foundation tonight, because we are in the business of building the future, and there is no future without healthy children. We are honored and humbled to be a part of your mission. She looked up, her speech concluded. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't gloated. She had not mentioned Jonathan's name once. And in doing so, she had delivered the most devastating social and professional obliteration imaginable. She hadn't needed to stoop to his level. She had simply risen so far above it that he ceased to matter. Her success was her revenge. The room erupted. It was a standing ovation, spontaneous and overwhelming. People were not just clapping, they were cheering. They were applauding the money, yes, but they were also applauding the story. The underdog, the quiet genius, the woman who had turned personal rubble into a global empire and had done so with breathtaking class. As Catherine stepped back from the podium, Arthur Pembroke was the first to greet her, his eyes shining with pride. "Magnificent, my dear," he whispered. "Absolutely magnificent." The stage was soon flooded with people, Foundation board members, philanthropists, Wall Street investors who had ignored her a mere hour ago and were now desperate for an introduction. She was mobbed, surrounded by a sea of outstretched hands and congratulatory shouts. Across the room, at table 3, the scene was one of utter devastation. People were actively avoiding it. The chairs around Jonathan and Bianca were empty. He was a pariah, a man who had publicly backed the wrong horse in the most spectacular fashion. He had mocked the woman who held the keys to his company's survival. He had revealed himself to be not just cruel, but a catastrophic fool. A waiter, oblivious, approached their table. "More champagne, Mr. Crestwood." Jonathan just stared blankly ahead, the sounds of Catherine's ovation washing over him like acid. He had spent 3 years believing he was the sun. He had just learned in the most public way possible that he was nothing more than a black hole, and her star had just gone supernova. A week after the Aura Airlines deal had detonated on the launch pad, the air in Seattle felt different. It was crisp and charged with the energy of creation, a stark contrast to the stale atmosphere of recrimination that now choked the executive suites in Chicago. The headquarters of Stellara Air was not a fortress of old money like Aura Tower, but a sprawling, light-filled campus of glass and cedar designed to foster interaction, not intimidation. It was here that the future of Vector Dynamics Aerospace would be reborn. Dr. Althea Grant and David Chen were met not by an assistant, but by Stellara's CEO, Maria Flores, and her chief technology officer, a brilliant, fast-talking engineer named Ben Carter. There was no formal procession to a sterile boardroom. Instead, they were led to a top-floor innovation lounge, a dynamic space with modular furniture, interactive smart walls, and a stunning panoramic view of Puget Sound. "Dr. Grant, it's an honor," Maria said, her handshake firm and her eyes conveying a respect that was immediate and genuine. "Ben and I have been following your work since your postdoc at MIT. Your thesis on quantum data arrays literally changed the way our R&D division approached predictive modeling." Ben Carter jumped in, his enthusiasm barely contained. "The elegance of the Odyssey system's architecture, Doctor. The way you parallel process the atmospheric and fleet-wide logistical data is nothing short of revolutionary. We have 1,000 questions. How did you solve the latency issue with transoceanic data relays? Is the Core A adaptable for ground crew optimization?" For the next hour, there was no talk of contracts, indemnification clauses, or market share. It was a high-level, passionate exchange of ideas between peers. Althea, who had been forced to defend her very presence on an Aura flight, was now being celebrated for her mind. She stood at one of the smart walls, sketching out complex data pipelines, explaining the nuances of the machine learning algorithms. She didn't just answer their questions, she expanded upon them, articulating a vision that went far beyond the current scope of Odyssey. "The system as it stands is designed to optimize flight," Althea explained, her marker flying across the digital screen. "But the core principles, predictive analysis, systemic integrity checks, can be applied to the entire operational chain. Imagine predictive maintenance scheduling based on real-time engine performance data or dynamic gate assignments calculated an hour before landing to minimize taxi time across the entire airport. This isn't just about saving fuel in the air, it's about building a perfectly efficient, holistic system from the moment a passenger books a ticket to the moment they retrieve their bag." Maria and Ben exchanged a look of pure excitement. This was a level of vision Robert Caldwell could never have comprehended. Maria shared a brief, knowing smile with Althea. "You know, when I was first starting out as an aerospace engineer, a senior manager told me I should switch to marketing because it was more suited to my temperament. I see a fire in you, Doctor, that I recognize well. It's the fire of someone who has had to be twice as good just to be seen as equal. We don't just want your technology, we want that fire here at Stellara." The deal they struck that afternoon was unprecedented. Not only did Stellara commit to the $150 million Odyssey integration, but they enthusiastically embraced Althea's broader vision. They announced an additional $50 million investment to co-found and build the Stellara VDA Skylab, a dedicated research and innovation hub that Althea herself would lead. Later that day, as they walked across the campus toward the auditorium for the press conference, David Chen shook his head in wonder. "I've known Bob Caldwell for 10 years, Althea," he said, his voice laced with a newfound contempt. "I never thought he was a genius, but I never imagined he was a fool of such historic proportions. He had the future in his hands and let it slip away because he couldn't see past the color of your skin." "I've been thinking about that," Althea said, her gaze distant. "About how this became so public. I never wanted to be a hashtag David. The attention is unsettling, but it's also a platform. If people are going to talk about this, they should be talking about the right things. Not just about me or one airline, but about the bigger principle." The press conference was packed. This was no longer just an aviation industry story. It was a major national news event. Reporters from tech journals, financial papers, and network news were all present, their cameras forming a wall of flashing lights. Maria Flores delivered a powerful opening statement about innovation integrity and partnership, her words a masterclass in strategic messaging. Then came the Q&A, and the questions were sharp. The first was the inevitable pointed query about her message for Caldwell and Brenda. Althea answered with the same grace and dignity she had shown all along, steering the conversation toward principle, not personality. Then a tech reporter stood up. "Dr. Grant, beyond the Odyssey system, what does this new partnership with Stellara enable?" Here, Althea's face lit up with genuine passion. "It enables us to ask, what's next? The Skylab isn't just about refining what we've already built. It's about pioneering the next frontier, fully autonomous ground logistics, AI-driven safety protocols that can predict component fatigue before it happens, building a truly sustainable model for air travel. It's about moving from reactive problem-solving to a future of predictive perfection." Finally, a reporter from a major news network raised her hand. "Dr. Grant, this incident has sparked a national conversation about race and respect, particularly in service industries. Do you feel a responsibility to be a voice in that conversation?" Althea took a deep breath, stepping closer to the microphone. "I feel a responsibility to do my job with excellence and to treat others with respect. That is a responsibility we all share. The conversation this has sparked is important, but it should not require a $150 million contract to be at stake for us to listen. Dignity shouldn't have a price tag. Respect shouldn't be reserved for the first-class cabin. It is the fundamental currency of a decent society. My hope is that my work and the integrity of partners like Stellara Air speaks for itself. And I hope it encourages a world where everyone's worth is recognized on site, no boarding pass required." Her words were met with a rare moment of stunned silence, followed by a wave of applause. Miles away, the echoes of that applause fell on deaf ears. Robert Caldwell sat in his cavernous, silent home office, the television screen showing Althea's triumphant face. His phone lay dark on the desk. He'd spent the day calling old business school classmates and corporate contacts, fishing for opportunities. The responses were all variations of the same polite dismissal. "It's a tough market right now, Bob," or "let me see who I know and get back to you," the corporate world's equivalent of a permanent goodbye. He was no longer a player. He was a cautionary tale and untouchable. In a drab, fluorescent-lit unemployment office across town, Brenda O'Malley sat clutching a ticket with the number E47. She was waiting to be counseled on her re-employment prospects. The woman next to her was scrolling on her phone and laughed. "Hey, you see this?" she said to her friend. "It's about that racist flight attendant from Aura. Serves her right." Brenda shrank in her plastic chair, pulling her collar up her face, burning with a shame so profound it was physically painful. She, who had once patrolled the aisles with an air of absolute authority, was now an anonymous, disgraced number in a queue. But the final scene of this saga was not one of wreckage, it was one of creation. The following Monday, Althea walked into the newly christened Stellar of Day Skylab. It was a vibrant open space already buzzing with energy. A diverse team of V-Day veterans and bright young Stellara engineers were gathered around a central cluster of whiteboards. "Okay, team," Althea said, picking up a green marker, a broad smile on her face. "The Odyssey system is yesterday's news. Today we start designing its replacement. No idea is too crazy. Let's build the future." An excited chatter filled the room as engineers rushed to the boards, sketching, debating, and collaborating. Althea stood in the middle of it all, not just as an engineer, but as a leader, a conductor of a symphony of innovation. The camera of her life pulled back to reveal a scene, not of a lone genius, but of a thriving community working together to build something better. This was the new horizon, not just a destination, but a new, more hopeful way of making the journey. And just like that, Catherine Dubois didn't just win, she rewrote the entire game. Her story isn't just about revenge. It's a powerful testament to the fact that true value isn't measured in couture gowns or public opinion, but in resilience, vision, and the quiet, unwavering belief in oneself. She built her empire not to prove her ex-husband wrong, but to prove herself right. His humiliation was simply a byproduct of her spectacular success. If Catherine's story of quiet strength and ultimate triumph inspires you, and you believe in the power of rising from the ashes, show your support by hitting that like button. It tells us you want more stories of incredible empowerment. What do you think was going through Jonathan's mind the exact moment her name was called? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life dramas.